or questions or your comments or your examples. And then I'll go back while you're thinking about your examples and explain a little bit more about what Ernest Holmes is talking about. So, Ryan, if people have questions or comments, how can they participate?
Thanks, Tracy, and welcome everybody, and especially welcome to those who are joining us in the Zoom room and watching us on Facebook Live. If you guys have questions or comments, if you're in the Zoom room, just hit the raise your hand icon located down below, or you can always put it in the comments or chats, and I can bring the questions into the room. Same goes for those who are on Facebook Live. Feel free to just put your comments or questions in the chat, and I'll bring those into the room as well. So share your experiences. What are your examples of this?
That's exactly what I'll be asking you to do. So, again, for anyone this is your first or second time with us, it's a class, but it's not a presentation. So, for it to be interactive, I need your comments. So, what is Ernest Holmes talking about in this paragraph under Seeing Perfection on page 212 of the Science of Mind? The middle sentence, a practitioner does not treat a sick person. The practitioner deals only with the idea, the spiritual person. Otherwise, if I were doing that, I would be entering into the vibration of suffering and might myself experience that. So, a lot of times when you are engaged in Science of Mind, you'll hear us say that there's nothing to heal, only truth to reveal. So when we are seeing perfection, we recognize that we are seeing the perfection of another person or of a condition that's not the way it was designed. At its core, it is perfect, it is good. It doesn't mean that what's happening is not happening. It means that I am not praying for the condition or the problem or the illness. I am praying, or I am doing a spiritual mind treatment that is clearly connected to the fact that I know the truth of this person. I know and believe and have faith in the truth of this person expressing. And so that's what it means when it says, if everything is mental, and that I have to see the good. So I will be curious, maybe you'll have a question about that, or maybe you have an example of when you were actually in a situation where you trained yourself or you noticed that you looked for the good and you refused to be distracted by whatever was right in front of you physically. So a comment or question?
Yeah, so we have a couple of them that have come through, but first I want to call Dennis into the room and have him talk. So Dennis, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Good morning, Ms. Brown.
Good
And
morning,
Mr. Brown.
Dennis.
Well, hello.
This is when you, yeah, when you mentioned like these two paragraphs to be like a 8-hour study, man, I've been practicing Science of Mind 9 years, and wow. But what I would like to share is, to me, there's two very, very important things that stick out here about. We're not creating a perfect idea. We're realizing the wholeness.
Yes.
Okay, and I love it. There might be a process of healing, but not in healing. Now, what really, really, I need to give kudos to. It was the greatest thing. It was in a class. Bert introduced me to. We were discussing in a class one time. Well, what do you do in this specific situation? Well, I said, well, what I have learned to do is step back from the situation and realize and look at the spiritual side of things. Oh, he jumped up and he's like on the whiteboard and he's like, Professor Burton. But he introduced me to the words relative and absolute.
Yes.
Okay. That's what we're talking about here. And ever since that moment, I have gotten much, much better. Now I can do it in like a heartbeat. I can go, whoa, no. Focus on the absolute.
Yes. So, Dennis, that's beautiful, but everybody doesn't know what you mean by the relative and the absolute. Do you want to break that down a little bit, or are you going to leave that to me to do?
Sorry, Dennis, I think I muted you. You want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Okay, I'm back. The relative, that's the things going on in what we call the physical world. This is what I see. Okay, so I can see something in the relative, but I can remind myself that's not the spiritual truth of the situation.
Right.
That's the absolute. The absolute never changes.
Right. So
when we are in true alignment, we are in the absolute.
Right. So
that's the way that I think.
Kudos to you, and kudos to Professor Bert Hedden for being able to bring it to you in a way that you could actually internalize it and then use it. Because in many ways, that's exactly what we have to understand in order to see the perfection. When we see the perfection, we're not talking about human perfection that we can grade on a scale of 1 to 10. Did you get a score of 9 out of 10? Did you get a score of 7 out of 10? And you have to get 10. We are looking, and Dennis, I'll use that framework as well at first, that we recognize that the perfection of spirit itself is the foundation upon which everything is happening, and that is the absolute. Each of us individually, every blade of grass, the way that the sun shines, the way that nature works is perfect, and we operate within that. So, and that is the relative. So the absolute is God's expression or spirit's expression in its natural state without anything that either takes away from it or detracts from it. We also have to be really careful when we use this idea of seeing perfection. We have to be careful that we're not seeing perfection or imagining perfection based on human standards. So sometimes a question will come up when we're talking about this part of the chapter, and people will ask a question in a class related to, well, how can a child who is born with cerebral palsy be considered perfect? Or how can the fact that I need eyeglasses, right? At third grade, I needed eyeglasses, be seen as perfection? And so perfection, when we are talking about it in the context of the spiritual absolute, means that, right, everything has been created individually and uniquely. And there is perfection in that. When we influence that by what we do, so we have a diagnosis of an illness, excuse me, that is the result of our eating habits, our refusal to exercise the physical body. We've influenced that, and we've gotten out of alignment with the way our body was designed to work. And that would be a relative condition, because I can begin to make healthy food choices and commit to and follow through on going out and walking every day and I will come back into alignment with the best capability that my individual body has been designed to express. Think about it in a garden or in your yard, right? You nurture plants, and if you don't water them, they die or they shrivel, and then you attend to them again to help them demonstrate and blossom and bloom and grow in a way that reflects their natural perfection. So the absolute is the innate quality that is within any form of life that reflects the intelligence of spirit expressing itself as that form of life. And the relative reflects the human, or in this case, the human condition or the human influence in that. So is your human relativity in support of and in alignment with what best serves you, or is your humanness detracting from that or distracting you from the absolute perfection that can exist? So I want to expand a little bit more on where Dennis was taking us into the second paragraph in this section on page 212. Healing is not creating a perfect idea or a perfect body. And those in the text are lowercase p, reflecting the human perception of a perfect idea or perfect body. It's revealing an idea which is already perfect, the idea behind that form of life which was planted within it from the moment of its creation. Healing is not a process, it is a revelation. And then the whole discussion about, or presentation of, there's a process in healing, but not a process of healing. Are you confused? You probably are, some of you. If you haven't heard that before, it's like, I remember in this moment, the very first time I read that, and I was like, a process in healing, a process of healing. How can I make sense of that? So there is a moment where you can know you are healed. You have gotten back into alignment, but your body then physically has to catch up with that. So let's use the body for a moment. You know you've done your prayer work, your spiritual work. Maybe you've had a practitioner do prayer with you. And on the inside, you can feel the shift happen where you are like, I am in alignment. I know that I am good, that this is just passing through my body. And the passing through my body is the process involved in healing or reflecting the demonstration of the truth. But the process of healing, it happened instantaneously. It happened the moment that everything got in alignment mentally, invisibly. So I think of the process of healing as the invisible revelation of the truth. The truth is revealed. The truth is clear. The absolute, like you're in alignment with that. But let's use my very simple example of I've been eating poorly, I've not been exercising, and I gain weight. So in the moment where I'm like, oh no, this is not me. This really is not the me who I know to be the way I've been designed to do. My body has been designed to move. My body has been designed to process food and use it as fuel and energy. And I know that, and I decide to be in alignment with that. The universe says yes. We also say treat and move your feet. So I do that treatment, and then I have to do what can happen for me on the physical plane, which means I then have to be the one that chooses what I eat, what food I put in my body. I have to choose to put on my shoes and go outside and walk. That's the part I have to do. And my body is in the process of repairing itself, because it's a physical experience. It's a physical there's a physical existence. So the cells in my body have to work together to then reflect or demonstrate what I know to be the truth. So we're simply revealing the best, and sometimes on a physical level that takes what we know in humanity as time and space. But in the absolute, in the nature of God itself, the choice has been made and the yes has been given. Now, I use that example with, weight and health and food just because it makes it easy to think about the human body, and it makes it easy to think about ourselves. But this is a basic principle that is true. It's not about just humanity and health and well-being. It is a spiritual truth that whatever condition I want to change, I need to see the physical expression of that as perfect. I need to have a vision of what the physical expression of that condition would look like, feel like, taste, touch, right? In the physical, what would be the expression of the perfection? And so whether we're talking about individual change in terms of career, I need to be able to see the perfection expressing. If I'm talking about humanity, right? That us as humanity, if I believe and I want to be in alignment with the end of poverty and homelessness, I need to be able to see what the perfection is, what the perfection will look like. And then is society in the process in healing as we move toward that? Yes. But the healing occurred as soon as there was a tipping point and enough people contributing into the collective consciousness that we live in a society where everyone is financially secure and everyone has a home. So that is, there's nothing to heal, there's only the truth to reveal. That is also, there's not a process in healing, but a process of healing, of generating the changes that need to occur on the physical plane to reflect the perfection of the spiritual plane. So I'm curious if you have questions, or if you have an example, or maybe you, like Dennis, have a way that it makes sense to you and you've been able to accept and then use this idea. So I'm going to turn to Ryan and see if we have any comments that are worth sharing or if we have any questions.
Yeah, I'd just like to invite anybody who's here with us in the Zoom room, please feel free to share or feel free to comment in the chat so that way we can bring it into the room. And I do want to remind everybody that I keep those anonymous, just so that way if you have something you want to bring up that may be a little bit more personal, I won't go ahead and release your name. So, would anybody like to share their experiences with us? I'd love to hear from somebody here in the room. And while we're waiting for somebody to raise their hand, you were talking more about the process of healing and the process in healing, right, Tracy?
Yes, comparing the two.
Right, absolutely. So, if we're talking about mental equivalent, that's thrown into this now. What if I don't have the mental equivalent? What if there isn't a reference point for me to look to see that there's actually a healing available to me?
Oh, that's a great question. So this idea of a mental equivalent, that there is someone or something that I can hold in mind that gives me or supports my faith. It doesn't give me faith. It supports my faith, or it allows me to imagine and create a visual of what it would look like in the physical. We don't always know exactly what it's going to look like. So it's a both and, not an either or. If I can visualize, like if I walk into a hospital and you are in the hospital bed and you're hooked up to different technology and tubes and there are beeps and things going on, and I've come to the hospital to spiritually support you and to pray for you or with you, I cannot deny that what my eyes see is someone who is getting really serious and important clinical or medical care, and I may know what happened. Maybe you were in a car accident, or maybe you just had surgery or whatever. I may know that on the human side. But what I'm going to know and see visually in my mind is, if I've known you, I might visualize you in a time when you were really happy and moving around and physically well. If I don't know you personally and haven't been around you that much, then I'm going to simply visualize you, without all of that. But sometimes, as you said, sometimes we don't have a visual. And that's when we really rely on our understanding of these spiritual principles. Many times, what I am finding myself doing is I simply know. I know that this person who is in the hospital is going to and is a representation of his or her or their own perfection. And I can claim it even though I may not be able to see it. But what I will not do is picture the illness or the technology or the sickness. I'm not going to attach to that. So you don't always have to have a conscious, visible, that you can visualize. Sometimes it truly is you are simply claiming the absolute truth, and you put all of your energy in connection with that. The one other thing that comes to mind about that is we tend to use the phrase mental equivalent because for us it helps us think of, I can hold a picture in my mind. But mental also means I can hold a truth in my thought, right? Mental simply means it's invisible. And then the other thing that comes to mind that I really want you to have in the back of your mind is that what Thomas Troward actually wrote about was the spiritual prototype. And we often use mental equivalent, but the spiritual prototype asks us or requires us to go beyond the physical of what we want and really connect in with what is the spiritual absolute truth. What's the principle or what's the attribute of God that we want to experience? And so when I do that and I connect with the spiritual prototype, very quick example, and then I want to hear some more of your questions or comments. So if I'm in the market for a new car, this is an example that we use a lot in classes. If I'm in the market for a new car, I might have a mental equivalent that my next car should be a certain make, model, and year. If I may have that, I may picture that, I may see it. Every time I'm driving or riding, I may see another one of those cars in that make, model, and year. But the spiritual prototype would be, especially if I'm not sure what kind of car, it's like, what do I want to experience from my new car? Well, of course, I want there to be safety. And I want to have a sense of peace when I'm driving it, because I'm not worried about it breaking down. So the spiritual attribute was, when I want this car to bring me a sense of peace when I'm driving it. And those spiritual prototypes don't always have a mental picture. They have a mental thought and feeling that are tied together. That too is seeing perfection. So a very long answer with 3 parts to the question. But what else do we have, Ryan?
Yeah, thank you. I loved it. It was very insightful. So I have one of the questions that came through the chat, and this asks, so when one can't visualize a mental equivalent, is it appropriate to do an argumentative treatment?
Oh, I love that. So let's make sure everybody knows what an argumentative treatment is. So spiritual mind treatment is our form of prayer in Science of Mind. It is an affirmative prayer. And in general, during a section of the prayer, for those of you who know the 5 steps of treatment, in step 3, we are affirming and declaring what is the absolute truth. We are declaring that. And so and that's, a declarative or a realization, what we expect to realize, a realization step. An argumentative treatment would, in that part of our process, would be a denial of what is not true, followed by an affirmation of what we want to actually realize, or what it would look like to realize the spiritual truth. An argumentative treatment in that section of the treatment would be more of it's not this, it's this, right? It's not illness, it's wellness. It's not fear, it's faith. And so one of the possible approaches, if I don't have a clear mental equivalent, is to use an argumentative treatment. But I would say that even sometimes when I do have a mental equivalent, probably then I'm more likely to do an argumentative treatment, because I have a mental equivalent, but there's some part of my brain saying, oh, but you can't have that. Oh, but that's never going to happen. And it's because I'm beginning to train my thought toward a specific outcome. But there's something in my human brain or my ego that is saying no, or I don't believe it, or I don't think so. So in that sense, I'm more likely to use the argument approach that addresses all of the things in my head that are coming out as but. But that will never happen. But I don't deserve it. But I never experienced that before. But my parents didn't do it that way. So in my treatment, I would be more likely to say, I am an example. My life is an example of financial security, financial health and security. I turn away from my parents' experience. Their experience has nothing to do with me. I am fully prepared to demonstrate financial health and security, right? It's like I'm going back and forth saying what might be the question or the barrier, and then following it up with what is the perfection or the absolute expressing in me. So as I was talking, it seems to me that it would be more likely to go into an argumentative treatment, at least for me, if I had a mental equivalent that seemed to be great for someone else, but I'm not quite believing it for me yet. Because remember, when we are doing spiritual mind treatment, we are basically convincing ourselves. We are doing the treatment to shift our own belief. We are not doing the treatment in order to change anything outside of us. That just becomes the result or the outcome of the shift of our own intention, the shift of our attention, and the shift of our belief.
I guess I'll jump in. Hey, how you doing, Tracy? I wanted to read this to you, and then I wanted to call in Connie into the room. So somebody remarked, what has helped me a lot during this pandemic is A, it's an illusion, a relative instead of an absolute truth. B, I am one with this absolute, regardless of time and space. C, of course, since I'm still so human, I still wear a mask, social distance, and etc. I always declare perfect wholeness within me as me. So I thought that was a really great sum up.
That is really beautiful with one, and there is one caution. So we have to be careful about using the word illusion, because when something is actually happening in the physical, it is happening. And so in the context of that comment, I know the person who wrote it knew exactly what they were saying, and they were using illusion correctly, right? That it is a reflection of human mentality versus absolute or spiritual mentality. I just add the caution for people who may not have as much experience in science of mind. That illusion doesn't mean it's it's imagination or it's magic or it doesn't exist. It simply means it's a reflection of a human misuse of imagination, misuse of belief, and it doesn't make it go away, which we all know with the rest of that example that went into the pandemic and COVID-19. Staying focused on, I am here to experience perfect health. I am able to navigate this, and I do my part. I treat and I move my feet. So yes, I wear the mask to protect me and to protect other people I come into contact with, because that's my part of evidencing the absolute truth, the perfection. So that's great. You want to bring Connie in?
Yeah,
Good
thank
morning,
you for that
Connie.
clarity. Yeah, Connie, would you go ahead and unmute yourself, and then after that, I'll get Sandra here in the room. Thank you.
You want to unmute,
Good morning,
Connie?
Tracy. Hi.
Great. There you are. I can hear
Yeah, I
you
did.
now.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. In my spiritual mind treatments, which I do every day, every morning, it's part of my routine, I tend to not want to deny the negative. And it's written right in there in the structure of the prayer. I say it for my Sangha sisters and other people who are on my list, but I only say that part that denies the negative one time at the end, but not every one. I just want to stay away from that for some reason. I think it's because it brings the energy of that negativity up. Something going on there. Can you help me with that a little bit?
Absolutely, I can. So that's a good practice. You don't want to get caught into denials, because you're then operating at the level of the problem. You're actually, recreating it. And so that's why we teach realization in step 3. We treat affirmation in the overall process. And there are times when, with an argumentative treatment, as the question was asked, there are times when I can say, no, I deny this. I deny the power. Some of you have heard me do treatments or prayers where I will say, I do not deny the existence of this cancer expressing in this person's body, but I deny that this cancer or any disease has the power to define the experience of this person. I claim and declare right now that the perfection of wellness and wholeness is seeking to express in every cell in this person's body, is working together now to demonstrate the wholeness that is the truth of this person. So I may use denial and then go on to say, what is the truth? The one thing I would say is if you use a denial, that you're not, usually, there are exceptions, but usually you're not denying the actual thing that's happening. You're denying that it has more power than, or that it has the power to define what is actually the truth seeking to express. And because of that, it would be unusual also to have a denial be at the end of anything. A denial, usually, if you are going to use it, is going to be a statement followed by what you are affirming as true. So you are overriding it. And you are mostly focusing on, so I don't want us to get off track with denials and think we're supposed to do them. We're not. That's what this chapter is about, and this section. When we see the perfection and connect to it and claim it, describe what it looks like, how it feels, what is the result of that perfection expressing, the majority of the time, we're not going to need to do denials because we are moving from whatever that condition was into the truth, or into revealing the capital T truth. It's just a skill that is sometimes used when, as in my example that I used earlier, when I notice that as I'm claiming the truth, my human brain is like resisting. My human brain is trying to say something else. Like, you can say those words, but no, I'm not having it. That's not really true. And if I notice that while I'm in prayer or in a treatment, I'm likely to deny the power of that thought and then go on to affirm the actual absolute or the actual truth that is seeking to express. So Connie, it's not a requirement to use denials, and in some ways I think it's an advanced skill that develops over time after we have so shored up a foundation that is so deep and strong in using the affirmative approach. And then the denial won't distract us from that. And they won't compete with each other because the denial will be immediately followed by 1 to 3 affirmations. So I hope that helps. Ryan?
Yes, I love that explanation. Thank you so much, Tracy. Sandra, do you want to go ahead and just unmute yourself?
Good morning, my friend.
Hey, Sandra.
I think you must be in my head this morning. We're thinking along the same line. To me, regarding a denial, the basic thing is that whatever I'm seeing with my physical being isn't the spiritual truth. Just is not the spiritual truth. If it does happen, back to something you said a minute ago, that I'm supporting someone and having a challenge, as you said, seeing them whole and claiming and knowing that it's not the spiritual truth, what I do then is call a practitioner and have them treat for me to around that, so I can stand in that. And it's just a comment, but yeah, that's sometimes it's really a group effort, and we're here to support each other in that way. So I just wanted to share that. We all are in the human experience, and we're all navigating that. So, but that's all I wanted to say.
Oh, I love that you shared that, Sandra, for several reasons. One, when we're reading through the textbook and Ernest Holmes says, don't see the patient as sick, it's easy to go, oh, okay. But so on the one level, anyone who's practicing science of mind is a practitioner. And then we have our licensed practitioners, or we have our practitioner emeritus, Sandra, who, even with all the experience that we have, there are times that our human nature is so strong. And, if as a licensed practitioner, as an experienced practitioner, if it's someone who I have a real personal relationship, it may be more difficult for me to separate myself from it and see and believe the truth. Or if it's someone where I know there's the backstory and I know a lot of detail about whatever it is, whether it's illness or career change or relationship challenges, I may need to separate myself or speak the truth and then do exactly what Sandra suggested. I may call someone else or text someone else and have them see the truth or remind me of the truth or get me grounded, because it's not just a one-off thing, as Sandra said. Like, it takes a family, it takes all of us, and it's our collective consciousness that sometimes helps. So if if any of us are ever having trouble seeing perfection, as this section focuses on, then that may be the time to step back or to reach out and have someone else help you get grounded in the perfection so that you can continue to hold consciousness for someone else. This chapter, this section of the chapter is really, really powerful. If you have the Science of Mind textbook, I highly encourage you to go to page 212, this Seeing Perfection. We've just this morning talked about the first two paragraphs, and we'll go into the remainder of this section, which goes to the end of the chapter next week. And this is meaty stuff. It's not super easy. So don't get frustrated. Just keep digging into it so that you can train yourself to see the perfection of spirit in all situations, all conditions, and all people, especially as it relates to the physical body. Ryan.
Yeah, and I just want to give everybody a reminder that starting this last Sunday of the month,
Yes.
we're going to be switching over to a new Zoom meeting ID number. So if you're a member and you've been receiving our weekly emails, just pay attention to your weekly emails. I'll be putting the new links in there shortly. Obviously, I'll update the website, so you can always visit CSLDallas.org to get the updated links there as well. And at worst case, you can always email somebody. We have info@CSLDallas.org and communications@CSLDallas.org too, if you need to reach out and need some technical service. So that's all I wanted to throw in there, Tracy. Thank you for allowing me to do that.
Yeah, so important, because we love it when you participate in the class, and we know many of you need to be on Zoom to be able to do that, to be able to actually, for us to hear your voice, and it makes a big, big difference. So thanks for your participation today, everybody. As we go through this week, let us all commit to seeing perfection, to training ourselves to look for the perfection, to attach to it, to claim it, and then to surrender into it. Have a great week, everybody.